Hello there. In this video, we're going to look at how visual mapping can support the decision making in an organization. In this case, it did more than that. It actually changed the culture of the organization. Hello, my name is Rui Martins. Welcome to SenseCatcher, where you can simplify, map, explore and explain your thinking visually. I'll see you straight after the intro. Let's get started with today's video. Decision making in organizations has a very long history. The focus of the approach is primarily to help people collectively get the organization to achieve its goals, search for the best alternatives, and utilize the available resources most effectively. It is easy to appreciate the importance of such an approach in any business. For our case study, I'll give you a little bit of background. When you have an organization that can receive anything of up to 250 complaints on a daily basis, you've got to agree that there's a problem, especially if the organization is not achieving its goals or delivering its services efficiently. The point then is, how do you go about fixing this problem? We used SenseCatcher to address the situation. Firstly, I'm not going to name the name of the organization nor the country, but I can tell you it's a railway organization and it's a public organization. A few years ago, Kim Martins was appointed as a consultant to create a knowledge management strategy for this railway company. But very quickly, within a few days of working there, she approached the HR director and informed him that such a strategy would be quite pointless to carry out within the circumstances of the company. Let me give you a little bit more background so you get a better feel for what we're dealing with. So prior to Kim's appointment, the organization had been restructured twice in the previous 5 years. In both restructures, 750 people had been made redundant, and a few of those were due to retirement. The first restructure involved the merging of small businesses into the main organization, but in the second restructure, the opposite happened. It was the dismantling of the organization into different parts, and these were privatized. As a result of the organization being highly fragmented, there was a poor sense of identity, there was a large shadow organization that developed, and as you can imagine, there was a loss of skills and know-how. There were problems with reporting lines, confusion, mistrust, and there were even things like derailment, issues with safety, and poor quality of service. In essence, the public were generally furious at the railway company. We could easily say that the organization was not delivering on its objectives. So SenseCatcher got involved to assist with the decision-making and problem-solving capacity of the organization. Our objective was to help the staff do their job. We had to provide the organization with a robust system despite any changes that had happened and that could still happen. We broke our intervention up into phases. The first phase, which is what we're dealing with in this video, essentially we looked at the training and mentoring aspect of our intervention and getting to understand the organization. We had to understand the decision-making and support structures within the organization, what was happening and what we could assist, how we could assist the organization. We used a voluntary department to work with us, and that was the infrastructure department. So the department consisted of 12 individuals led by a 70-year-old mechanical engineer who was about to retire in the next 12 to 18 months. In the beginning of our working relationship was a bit awkward and difficult, but that changed quickly once they realized that we were there to help and not to micromanage them. We were there to act as enablers. Once the staff saw the massive benefits to their workflow and productivity, their attitude changed and became highly engaged and cooperative with us. The way we started was to ask the staff to document their decision-making and problem-solving activities. We essentially asked them to document their journeys by visually mapping their thinking. At the same time, we asked them to reflect at a meta level and comment on their processes. We asked them to use the how, why, and what method, which is actually a very simple method, but it gets people engaged quite naturally. Now, I'm not going to get into the power of visual thinking. There are many resources in sensecatcher.com for you to read. What I will say, however, is that there is strong evidence that we humans think symbolically, and then language, including writing, comes second. Okay, getting back to our case study. As I said, once the staff understood the benefits of using SenseCatcher, the magic started. They started to experiment, and as soon as they realized that there were no rules, there was no holding them back. The pace of work simply accelerated. Once people realized how easy, organic, and flexible the visual mapping process is, we saw an explosion of maps and workflow. And they were just very creative. Shortly, I will show you a few examples of the early processes and maps that they went through. I must quickly add that I have not used any original maps. Due to privacy reasons, I've recreated them based on my records. In the first phase, our main objective was to identify a template that could be rolled out throughout the organization. And it had to be something that was created by the staff and not imposed onto them by us. We knew that the moment we could get to that point of ownership, we were on a home run. This aspect was very important, not only because of the issues of trust, but we wanted them to have the full control and to make changes and adjustments as their thinking evolved with new knowledge. Knowledge needs to become public and part of the collective. There is no them and us. The actors are also the creators and the users. Okay, getting back to the infrastructure department, as it turned out, the group of people became what we could easily call evangelists. They took ownership of the process, the template that they developed, and on their own steam and initiative, they rolled out the approach throughout the organization. Okay, I think I've said enough. Now what we're going to look at is at the examples in the interface, in SenseCatcher application itself. Okay, so here we are. We log into SenseCatcher software, and we're going to look at track one particular person very quickly. I've only got a few minutes. How they started by looking at a particular situation, which was broken rails. So they started exploring who the contacts they had, what sort of information the contacts could provide them. For instance, this particular person, which is, well, it doesn't matter because it's not a real name, but anyway, so the person, they could identify names, contact details, what kind of information they had on that person, sort of videos, voice recordings, documents, etc. This one, for instance, they discovered, or this particular engineer discovered, had left and decided to identify with an icon. We need to find this person because the documents that we've had on this person sounds like really valuable. And essentially by clicking that, you can attach any information associated with that person, videos, web links, photographs, audios, etc. You could then also find out how much information you've got on this map and where that information is. And then very basic things. For instance, you decide as a map creator what the relationships are. You can group things, attach, as I said, information to any icon. So visually you can understand how the problem is associated, and you can document by attaching information to a particular cluster or a particular element, or even an arrow can contain information, and you can identify whether the relationship, what kind of relationship, by sort of changing the size of the arrows, etc. So this person then started looking at, in this particular case, at broken rails, what sort of potential solutions they could find. And then that, through discussions, etc., decided that they needed to expand, and that particular map evolved into a more complex map as the person got more information, started talking to others. So that was a typical map. For instance, if you look at nesting, so you can call it what we call nesting. So it's map within maps. The relationship that this map is linked to other maps. And here we can look at, for instance, the railway network itself, where they can identify, this is the way they decided to do, where the problems were occurring, and they could document dates, what the issues were, how much information, videos, recordings, anything associated with particular hotspots. Then the group started to create these individual maps, and they decided, well, we need to bring these maps together, and the best thing to do, really, they decided, was to create a dashboard. So let me see if I can find that. There we go. So this was the beginning of their dashboard. It was quite rudimentary. They started to identify what the sort of broad issues were, and at first they were linking directly to the documents and the kind of and the consultants that they could find. That then, when all the group started to work more closely together, they then decided to develop a more coherent, and their final dashboard was not dissimilar to this one. So they had identified all the issues that they dealt with as an infrastructure department, and then they had all the maps, say, looking at switches and crossings. They had a list of all the maps associated with that, the people that they found useful and they had contacts with, and they listed, and these were sort of almost like portals into detailed information. So they had news, discussions, notice boards at a broader level, and then the detailed information. And that's really it. I was told to not take too long, 15 minutes. So essentially that was the foundations of the template that we rolled out. So people identified the details of the problems that they were dealing with, and then how to bring all those particular problems and information, contacts, etc., under what they then decided to call a dashboard. So each department or area had a dashboard, and these dashboards then became all interlinked. And that was really the template that got rolled out. So I'm quite happy to talk and discuss any questions. I obviously haven't looked at how to create these maps and how the interface works, but there's information about that elsewhere. Thank you very much.